So this session is English language session Q&A. I don't know if there are any questions that have been written down and prepared already, but it's also open for anyone who would like to ask in a normal way. Just take the microphone and go ahead. The can be about things I've talked about already today, yesterday, or fresh topics. Anything at all, please feel free. For those of you not very familiar with this kind of environment, asking questions from monks, just very informal, and you don't have to worry about saying things in a special way, or that there are things off limits. Anything that you want to ask, I'm happy to answer. Okay, so these are all Thai language questions. มีแต่ภาษาไทยสามข้อ Okay, so there's pencil and pen and paper available if anyone prefer to write their question down. Otherwise, can, as I say, just ask for the microphone and ask your question. So I have a very practical, a more sort of practical question. How do you know which college, university is right for you? I think this question is actually a kind of a subset of a larger question, and that is, how do you know any decision that you're making is right for you? How do you know this is the right college for you? How do you know this is the right job for you, the right career for you, the right relationship for you? You know, how do you know beforehand that the decision you're going to make is going to be a good one? So there are certain, in the case of university or college, then of course there are certain things that you need to study, you need to do your homework about and clarify why do you want to go to university in the first place, what for, and what do you want to gain from going to university, and what course, what do you want to study, and then just do the normal thing of Googling or on AI or whatever, and finding the information about colleges that seem to offer the things that you're looking for. So it's as straightforward as that. And then, of course, it's going to depend to a degree, or a large degree, on your own exam results and whether or not you have the qualifications to be able to attend the college that you want to, or whether your family has usually it's your family has the financial resources to be able to support you in that. So there are all these kinds of considerations, aren't there? But as I said, in the larger picture of decision making, first thing that from Buddhist point of view is to ask yourself, looking back in your life or looking at other people, what are the conditions that support good decision making? And what are the factors that influence bad decision making? So I'm sure you can look in your own life or family members or in the news or, even if you're a student of history. History's series of decisions made by powerful people, and so many occasions when even the smartest, brightest people, the most well-funded think tanks make terrible decisions. But as a general principle, we can say that the more mindful you are, that's to say, the less you are influenced by your personal desires and fears and prejudices, etc., then the clearer your mind will be, and the more reliable the decision you make will be. So I think it's important to recognize that even with choosing a college or a university, something which there is a lot of information available for you to make use of in making a decision, you'll never get to that point where you've processed, you've digested every single item of information, and you've come up with an infallible decision based upon that information. You're never going to get there. And there needs to be a kind of a cut-off point or a deadline in which you give yourself to that kind of investigation, and then to make your mind as clear and bright and equanimous as possible, and then to make the decision, knowing that you can never be 100% sure. It's always a gamble. Every decision is a gamble to some degree or another. There's no absolute guarantee that any decision you make will necessarily be the right one. One of the most interesting books to have been written the last 20 years or so, book called Black Swan. Does anybody know this writer called Taleb, and a book called Black Swans? It's really worth reading. And he talks about the inherent systematic impossibility of predicting usually the most important factors in situations, that there are things which are not predictable. And this is why when we look at the history of prediction by experts and academic experts in every field, how poor their record is of prediction. Because they're predicting things according to their models. And no matter how good your model is, it can't, there's certain things it cannot predict. There are unpredictable events that occur. And those unpredictable events have huge ramifications. Why this is not recognized so widely is because academics and people in power rewrite history, and they create a new narrative to sort of include these unpredictable elements. And so you don't realize that we live in a world which is unpredictable in certain very important areas, and our models are not able to encompass these unpredictable elements. So this gives a certain kind of humility to decision making. But the practical advice, I mean, there's a lot in this book, and I'm just skimming it, so I would recommend you looking at this book, is to emphasize robust systems, robust models. What I mean by this, and this I like this, you see, because it's very similar to the Buddhist approach, which we call maiprabhat, or heedfulness, which is based upon the very same idea that rather than trying to predict every single thing that will happen to you in life, which you can't, you try to develop yourself to a point where you are confident you'll be able to deal with whatever happens. And so his advice is creating systems which have like plan Bs and plan Cs and plan Ds built into them. Because we are creating a world that is increasingly fragile and interdependent. So you have one problem, one unexpected problem in one area, and it affects the whole thing. So the common sense response to that is to create systems which are not so interrelated or which have alternative functions when there is an unexpected problem arises. So just to summarize, one, you're going to make a decision, do your homework, but give yourself a deadline, because these days the amount of information is almost infinite and you can just go round and round in circles and not really clarifying situations so much after a certain point. Secondly, recognize that when you do make a decision, that it's not an absolute guarantee, even if the logic is absolutely solid. Thirdly, that the state of mind in which you make a decision is extremely important, and training your mind to put down to free yourself, separate yourself from the influence of giled or defilement and selfishness and greed and dislike and jealousy, etc., etc. And then lastly, this point that we're living in a world which is inherently unpredictable, which has unpredictable elements. So let's say you did all your homework and you were admitted into a college of your dreams, the curriculum of your dreams, the faculty of your dreams. Everything is just even better than you thought. And then a war occurs, and then you're drafted into the army, and you're sitting on a hill somewhere with a gun. So these things can happen, as you know. Where did you get your knave? And what does it mean? What's a knave? Whose question is? I don't understand the question. The question is, where did you get your knave? And what does it mean? Well, whoever asks, if someone's a bit shy about, if you could rewrite it and clarify what you mean by that question. How can I reach enlightenment in this life? Wow, good question. Well, there are no guarantees, of course, and I think probably to begin with, Paula, come time, Paula. I think probably a better way to start is, how could I be less unenlightened in this life? And that's a good starting point. the monastic order, the Sangha, is institution that was created by the Buddha in order to minimize all the obstructions to the realization of enlightenment and maximize all the supporting conditions. That's the reason why the Buddha created the Sangha. So for someone who, I would still say for someone who is really intent on practice for enlightenment, if you're a male, the Sangha is probably still the best bet. Unfortunately, not necessarily the case for women in Thailand, although there are some monastic institutions, Mechi, even Bhikkhuni now, but this is really the weak point of Thai Buddhism in the present day. But the principle is, to realize enlightenment, you have to be creating external conditions to support you in that. So if you have the faith and the interest in following the path to enlightenment, but within the lay life, then that's also possible, at least the first stage of enlightenment, we call stream entry. And many lay men and women over the past 2,500 years, leading a normal life in society, have realized this level of enlightenment. And it is absolutely key, because once one realizes this first level enlightenment, the other levels of enlightenment become inevitable. This is what's called entering the stream to Nibbana. But to reach that level, then first of all we need to be keeping 5 precepts very strictly, and to take 8 precepts at least on the Uposatha days, like twice a month, or every one prat, which would be once a week, and then going on retreats every year in which you can really deepen your meditation practice. You need to be meditating every day and studying. And the point which many people overlook is samma achiva, having a livelihood which is not obstructive to your spiritual practice. Ideally one which supports it and is in harmony with it, but at the very least one which is not in conflict with it. What are the benefits of understanding your psychological roots and emotional understanding? Well, I can't see any benefits in not understanding them. I mean, if you don't understand your psychological roots, your emotional life, then you're stumbling in the dark. What's the benefits of walking in a busy street? What are the benefits of keeping your eyes open? What's the alternative? Closing your eyes and just being buffeted by whoever comes along, knocks you over, and so you're at the prey of your emotions and the things that are going on inside your mind, and you don't realize. And this is why people are constantly the word I use is sabotaging their life. You want to be happy, and then you create all the causes and conditions for unhappiness, and you wonder what went wrong. If you want happiness and unhappiness, these are not like very mystical concepts. You can establish the causes and conditions of things that allow well-being in your life to thrive, and those things that undermine that well-being. And then you can apply yourself wisely and correctly. But unless you really know what's going on inside you, how can you How can you plot a path in your life? How can you avoid all the minefields and all the dangers? And how can you make the best of the opportunities you have if you don't know what's going on inside your mind? Do you believe in fortune telling? Yes, I believe it goes on all over the world. But I think what you mean by is, do I believe that people can tell fortunes? I think that, like, fortune telling depends who it is. There are a lot of fakes, of course. I would say there's sort of a little amount of truth mixed in with the falsehood, and sometimes some Mordu, some fortune tellers who people go through a period where they have a quite successful. Their success rate is quite high, but it's never really what it's made out to be. And the problem is that the true and the false is so mixed together that you can never know which is which. But really the question would be, why would you go to a fortune teller in the first place? If you're just going for a bit of fun, I think that's fine. It's fun. It's kind of sanuk. But if you take it too seriously, to the extent that you start making decisions, well, I can't do this today because the Mordu said this, or I've got to do that tomorrow, and then it's like, someone was talking to me about the present-day divorce rate in Thailand, which is very high. And almost all of those married couples went to Mordu, asking, what's a ruk ngam yam di? Yes. So, of course, you could say, but if they didn't go to the fortune teller, they probably wouldn't even have lived together that long, So there's always a way you can justify it. But I think a lot of it is just banteng, it's just fun kind of thing. But that it wouldn't be very wise to base important decisions upon it. Even if you were to make an important decision based upon the advice of a fortune teller, and then you were successful, that would probably be the worst thing that could happen to you, because it would undermine so much of your more intelligent analysis of things, So, this seems, you use all your brain and your intelligence and your sati panya, and then you say, but what does the Mordu say, So it's like you just basically thrown away all your education and all how much money your parents have spent on you, so that you can make wise decisions, and then throw that out the window and say, but at the end of the day, I'm going to do what the Mordu says. So I'm not in favor of that, of course. What is intuition from Buddhist perspective, and to what extent should we trust our intuition in decision making? Not very much, I wouldn't say, at the beginning. Intuition is one of those kind of fuzzy, nothing kind of words which sounds something special but usually isn't. People have false intuitions. And when people think that they have, people say, oh, I'm a woman, I understand certain things that men can't understand, like feminine intuition. But how many times I've seen that where people have got things wrong because they believed in their intuition too much. So I would say intuition is a factor to bear in mind. It's one thing, not to dismiss it altogether and say, it's meaningless, but it's just one factor, and it's a fallible factor. It's like gut feeling, I just feel it in my gut, this is right, this is what I really need to do. And do a scientific study and see how often that works out. Where gut feeling and intuition tend to be reliable is with very experienced people, very experienced in a particular area of life. That's to say, when you do something, you learn something, and you experience something again and again and again and again and again and again. You're some kind of, say, professional rally driver, or you do something where you just integrate all the memory and all of the experience, and it's kind of there, subconscious, or some like muscle memory, something similar to that, and it's a shortcut. So intuition is like a shortcut to all of the experience and memory and knowledge that you've accumulated. But if your experience and your knowledge is very small, then your intuition is going to be quite unreliable. The more experience you've had, the older you are, the more you've seen, the more exceptions to the case, the more variations, then that wordless kind of intuition is more reliable. So it's a kind of a distillation of experience. And so its reliability will depend upon the extent and the quality of the experience. How do you stop feeling cringed, embarrassed, ashamed of your past actions? There are a number of different issues here. One is shame's not a bad thing in itself. So in Buddhism, we distinguish between guilt and shame. Okay, so in the Buddhist psychology, guilt is like a negative mental factor, and shame is a positive mental factor. Guilt arises from wrong thinking, mistaken thinking about some bad action we've committed. Shame, at least in the form of hiri, in the Pali word, is a recognition that a particular action was wrong, foolish, mistaken, hurtful, and so on. So it's a full recognition of the action, not trying to excuse it or make it go away or trying to repress it. But the difference here is that with guilt, there's this sense of I am, very strong. This is the defining characteristic of guilt. I am a bad person. I am this. I am that. So this idea is because I did this, I am that. Okay. So that's what we say would be like false logic. But the Buddhist view would be when you did something bad, let's say in the past, then we look at all what contributed to you acting in that way. And you can say, well, at that time in my life, I had only this much wisdom, intelligence, only this much patience, only this much kindness, only this much mindfulness, and I had so much anger and so much resentment and so much jealousy, and so it's clear that the strength of those negative mental states in your mind at that time was so much stronger than the wholesome or mental states. So we understand, this is why this happened. So why this is a positive recognition? Yeah, you feel ashamed, but there's hope there because, you see that it's not because I am this kind of person and I'm doomed to act in this way forever. But you see, well, if I reduce the amount of anger and resentment in my mind, if I reduce the amount of jealousy and etc., and I increase the amount of mindfulness and compassion and patience, then I can be confident that I won't, in that same situation, I won't act in that way in the future. So we can say we're works in progress. And so at that particular time in your life, the negative mental states influenced your behavior more than positive mental states. And this is why it's so important to put effort into this Dhamma practice so that we can feel we have a way forward whereby we will not act in that way again in the future. But the sense that such an action is shameful, that's like a break. That's a first way of protecting you against acting in foolish or harmful ways. That's not something to be thrown away. So in the as regards the question, then I think there's two things here, and are we talking about feeling privately embarrassed, or we mean being embarrassed in front of other people? And the next extent, is this a genuine remorse, or is it simply a matter of our standing and the image that we have in our group or in our society, our community? So I think when we recognize, you don't try to hide things. You don't have to be telling everybody everything you've ever done that you feel embarrassed about. But it's not like hiding it away or afraid that somebody will find out, or whenever somebody speaks about something, you should shrivel up. But you say, yeah, I was so stupid then, when I look back at myself, I feel really ashamed. But it was a turning point in my life. That's when I gave up alcohol. That's when I stopped doing this, stopped doing that, because I realized, this is not good for me. So things that have made you ashamed, they can be keys, and they can be things that have real leverage in helping you to make difficult changes in your life, so that kind of action will not take place again in the future. The question, how do you motivate yourself to work hard for your goals without adding stress and tension? I think you need a hierarchy of goals, or at least a number of goals, so that career goals are not the goals in your life. That's narrowing your life too much. And again, looking at your motivation for working towards goals. Why? What is the purpose of reaching this goal? Because if reaching goals becomes the number one overriding factor in your life, then you'll tend to cut corners. You cut corners in your relationships, cut corners in your spiritual life and other areas of your life, because everything becomes focused on this one thing. And so we find this, don't we, that people who have these like short-term, at least, very successful in one particular area of life, that they often kind of incomplete as human beings, and rather emotionally immature, because they sacrifice so much of their growth as human beings and subordinate it to reaching these goals. So I think that setting yourself a goal and making sacrifices for it is a really good thing, but it's more the effort itself. And you reach a goal, and then what happens? Then you need another goal and another goal and another goal. But if you're looking more as how can I become better and better at something that matters, that's quite a good slogan. I'm trying to become better and better at something that matters. And the goals, you realize the goals, but the goals don't become like the main thing. They're just prizes along the way, but it's part of a bigger project, of your life and trying to create the best possible life for yourself. So with goals, if you're patience is an obvious one, developing patience and being able to bear with discomfort, physical and mental discomfort. Short term, this is probably the number one supporting factor. How do you approach eating to nourish your body mindfully and realize when you've eaten enough? If you have problems with the volume, the amount of food that you're eating, then there are some very simple techniques that you can use. One is when you eat like a reasonable amount of food, and you realize, today that was just podi, not too much, not too little, then see how many minutes it took you to eat the food. And then do that a few times, and you'll get a sense of, if I eat for that number of minutes, then that's the, and then you just make that your thing. I will eat, I'll enjoy my meal, but I won't eat more than that number of minutes. So this is like something that monks will do. The other thing, like an even more refined meditation or mindfulness technique, is to count the number of mouthfuls you take. And then you have then of course that again is more of appropriate if you're eating alone or you're eating as in a monastery or on a retreat. But counting the number of mouthfuls and then saying whether I feel hungry or whether I don't, or I don't care. I reach that number of mouthfuls, so I'm stopping. So it's a really good way to develop self-discipline, but it's also a way to see how your mind tries to trick you. Because when you say, oh yeah, that's enough, I'm full. No, I still, just a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. But then when you have this kind of objective standard of number of minutes or number of mouthfuls, then you're able to see through that. So finding that kind of objective standard. Another thing that in the monk's discipline, I don't know anybody who does this, but very much. I did it for a while. Is when you feel you're approaching the right amount of food, you stop and you drink water. And so the water just fills up with any excess, whatever feeling of lack is there in your body, without taking on any food. If you are given to overeating a lot and been kind of losing your mindfulness a lot, drinking water before you take food also takes away the edge of your hunger and help you to be more mindful while you're eating. how to find internal peace and stop overthinking. Well, this is exactly what we're here to practice, isn't it? So the answer I would give, preliminary answer, is developing quality of mindfulness and developing the ability to maintain, sustain attention in the present moment, and if the mind wanders off, becoming aware of it very quickly and re-establishing attention before it gets too caught up in overthinking. So overthinking is just a habit that you've developed. It's not like a necessary part of the brain's functioning. It's just something that you've done more and more and more until it's become second nature. So there's a little bit of a struggle and stress to change that habit. And similarly with the striving for goals that I mentioned just now, a lot of the stress and the anxiety, it comes because of the lack of mindfulness in preventing the mind going down the track of anxiety and thoughts about what if this and what if that. And so just returning briefly to the previous question, it's very important to make a distinction between pressure and stress. Pressure is good. Pressure can be very good in bringing out your best work. But pressure becomes stress when you start thinking about it in the wrong way. So learning that skill of preventing the mind from brungtang, from proliferating, from adding on to things. There's a trigger thought. And if you're mindful at the presence of a trigger thought, then that just passes away. But if you're not mindful, the trigger thought will lead to another thought and another thought and another thought and another thought, and then you're down that path of conceptualization and overthinking and so on. So it's having that mental sharpness to take care of your mind and not get caught up in overthinking. Over the years, new technologies were created, such as computers, smartphones, internet, AI, etc. From the Buddhist point of view, what technology is allowed for normal people and what is allowed for monks? Oh, so you don't think monks are normal people, huh? Okay. So, well, the monastic discipline, the rules which govern the monk's life, were created by or taught by the Lord Buddha 2,500 years ago. And so obviously there are no references to all these modern technologies. And so no clear-cut guidance as to what is allowable and what is not allowable. But the Buddha gave us a principle, a criteria to refer to, and that is that when something new appears, we should look at all the things similar to it that the Buddha allowed and those which he did not allow, and then we make a decision, which category does that fall into? Is it similar to, somewhat like these things that the Buddha disallowed or these things that the Buddha allowed? So there will be some difference of opinion on this matter, and in Thailand maybe the Mahathera Samakom would be the arbiter of of that. So there's no, I think, as you probably know, computers, smartphones, internet, AI, these things, many monks will make use of these things. I've made use of them. But it's more a matter of how they're used, what controls there are, what's the purpose of their use, etc. So they can, if they are being used in a way which is in harmony with the monk's life and is in support of the study, the practice, the propagation of Buddhism, then they may well be allowable. But it will depend also on individual monasteries. Smartphones are a good example, and I think that most monks will say that the decline in standards in monasteries, young monks, particularly over the past 10 years, very clear correlation with smartphone use. Nevertheless, very few monasteries have restrictions on smartphone use. One very good example of restrictions on smartphone use is Wat Nanachat, where young monks are not allowed to have phones, and then Ajahn Jayasaro, what's the standard in England or in the West? You know? Pan? Wait, how many pansar before? Yeah. So in our monasteries, in the Western monasteries, Ajahn Jayasaro has spent many years in England. He's recently come here. Then you have to have 10 years as a monk before you can use a smartphone. So the idea being that you have a maturity and a restraint and self-discipline to be able to use these things well, but not allowing them to be distractions for younger monks who are still so well trained. So for normal people like yourselves, I'm guessing here, being an abnormal person, but I would say, having that same kind of criteria. How important? I mean, a lot of these things you can't live without these days. I mean, they're just part and parcel of modern life. But how do you use them? How much do you use them? What's your relationship to them? How does use of them affect your relationships with other people? How does it affect your mental health? So bringing these things up as constant objects of contemplation, not just saying, well, yeah, that's just our life these days, because there are, as we know, these smartphones and social media, these things are designed by very, very intelligent people to create addiction in the consumers. That's part of their how they design things. So these are not kind of just tools like a knife in the cupboard or something. These are technologies which take into account human psychology, and they are designed in such a way to manipulate the human mind, the human brain, in order to create maximum profits for the companies who produce them. So when you consume these things, you should bear that in mind. These are not kind of bland, neutral objects. They are objects designed by people who have designs on your mind. So be very careful how you use them. How would you reflect on facing adversity? Well, there's another really big topic, isn't it? What do we mean by adversity and the different kinds of adversity? A general observation is that when everything's going well, we tend to become rather lazy and heedless, take things for granted, and we don't really develop and mature when life's too easy. So having a certain amount of difficulty and obstacles and adversity in life is, big picture, a good thing. But it would depend on the intensity, or the difficulty, how moral or fair the adversity. I mean, if you're being mistreated and then it's not necessarily a good thing. I mean, it's not a matter of just being patient with adversity. When the adversity is coming through a situation which should not have been created in the first place. So it's not just a kind of passive teaching of, difficult things, just opt on and be patient. Because in certain circumstances, things need to be changed. And so we need to use our wisdom to see. But adversity makes us think, makes us struggle, makes us creative. It brings up all kinds of good things, useful things in our life. And a lack of any adversity at all is usually, for most people, not a very good thing. I'll just answer one more this morning. How will religion, Buddhism, evolve in the age of artificial intelligence, especially in the context of applying philosophies in everyday living and personalized to your context? And there's like a Venn diagram here with one circle, all of your information, and then all the world's religious knowledge, and AI is the kind of the overlap between them. I'm not sure I would really agree with that representation. Well, we're on a kind of a roller coaster ride at the moment. AI has suddenly appeared, and it's changing, evolving incredibly rapidly. Nobody knows where it's going and where it's going to take us, and where we'll be left, when it's gone, where it's going. So it's difficult to really draw too many conclusions. I think that at present, AI services, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini and all these different services, give immediate access to Buddhist teachings or religious teachings. And for someone who's really keen on finding answers, then that's a wonderful thing. I think it's like I certainly derive a lot of benefit from it. Specific difficulty. Well, not necessarily. That is that Buddhism is not a doctrinal or a dogmatic religion, in the same way that the monotheistic religions of the Middle East, like Judaism, Islam, Christianity, you can't just say, what is the Buddhist teaching on this? Because there are so many different Buddhist teachings in the different Buddhist traditions, and even in Thailand or in a particular Buddhist country, and there are different approaches to things, and so it doesn't really have like a body of knowledge which you can access in the same way that I was recently seeing someone debating a Catholic chatbot. It's really good fun. He was pointing out some logical inconsistencies in the Bible and how the AI is trying to twist out of it and wriggle, and it's very, very fun. But Buddhist chatbots, I don't think, can be used in that same way because it's a different kind of religion. But if you want to, if you can be very specific, and I guess this is true of use of AI in most areas, if you can be very specific in the prompts, then the more specific you are, usually the better answer. So if you were to say, what is the attitude towards this in the Thai forest tradition of Lumpuman or something like that, then you probably get good answers, rather than just generally Buddhist, because it could be Mahayana and Vajrayana and all these different kind of Buddhists, and the answers are not necessarily the same. I think as these days most people don't have opportunity of going to monasteries regularly, don't have chance to speak with monks and ask monks questions or nuns, then AI can perform very good function, just as YouTube or even Google has been over the past few years. But at the end of the day, as we say, it's a matter of integrating this information and putting it to practice in your life. That's what it's really for. But if anyone's interested in a study, like a Buddhist curriculum, then there is something out quite recently which I would recommend. It's called the Open Buddhist University. And it's a young American monk who he was, I don't know, they say he was in Silicon Valley at some point, but he doesn't seem that old now. But he's created this whole website with a library of Buddhist books on every kind of topic you can think of, with downloadable books and links, and also a curriculum where you can study particular areas of Buddhist teaching that you're interested in. So in terms of online resources, this is something I just came across recently, and from what I've seen of it, it's very good.